Hey, how's everybody doing? This is Suzanne again for Suzanne's Tutoring. You are probably watching this on YouTube, where you can find my channel at YouTube/Suzanne's Tutoring. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And when you're looking for me, just look for the big red S. You can also find my website at Suzanne'sTutoring.com. So yes, I am now available on YouTube and on my website. You're getting some free study tips, the free PDF downloads, free tutorial playlists, and there are never any ads, there are never any fees, there are no memberships to sign up for, there are no forms to fill out. No kidding. I don't ask for your personal information at all because it's none of my business.
Okay, hi. Hi, St. Louis Community College. How are you doing? I am so sorry that I couldn't have been there the other week when you guys had this live. Oh man, life happens, and so right after that, I ended up in the hospital for about a week. So, woo! So I am back on track, and I apologize. So I normally don't put my big ugly mug on here, but I felt like you guys deserved some eye contact from me while I did this, since you were nice enough to show up, and I could not. 2 Fridays ago. So we're going to do some how to study stuff. So we're going to do some study skills, and Jeffrey already went over this stuff with you, but I had said that I was going to put this up on my YouTube channel, and so you can go back to it and refer at any time. And since I have been in the hospital for a week, and I have my own catching up to do with my classes up at Umsel, I'm also going to cover how to catch up when you get behind in classes. So that's a little extra added bonus for you today. All right, so we are going to talk about how to study and some short slides. So studying without screaming. All right, here we go. Studying without screaming. All right, so here we go. Studying without screaming. Have you ever been able to do that? Or maybe studying without curling up in a fetal position, weeping, going, I can't do this, I can't do this. Because I know I've done that for some of my classes, but it always turned out okay as long as I hung in there. So my whole goal of this is to make sure you know that you can do this, and you just got to hang in there. Do not give up. And life happens. You're going to have to adjust things by the seat of your pants sometimes, because life happens and craziness happens, but you can do this. Do not let life rob you of what you deserve, which is an education, because it is so important. And I am so happy that you're watching this, and that we're electronically here together. So when you study, you're going to study with two major goals, right? The first is to understand the things, and the second is to remember the things. And that's pretty much broken down. That's pretty much the two things that you're doing in class. You're trying to understand it, and then you're trying to remember what you just understood. Now, I have good news for you coming up here later on in the talk about understanding, because as long as you can figure out how to understand the stuff, it's going to make it that much easier to remember the things. But first, I want to do a few study tips for everybody. So just a couple of things, and this is my famous study tips soapbox that I always get on, that if you work with me as a tutor, as a tutee, then you'll hear me repeat this over and over and over again. And the first thing is drink orange juice. Drink orange juice right before you study, and drink orange juice right before you go in and take the test. Now, there's a couple of reasons for this. It's not just one reason. One reason is because your brain runs on sugar. And orange juice is kind of a time-released sugar, and so you don't have that like nasty sugar crash if you were to get all hopped up on sugar and then go in and try to take a test. I made the mistake one time of telling a student of mine that our brain runs on sugar, so she needs to feed her brain when she's studying and then when she goes in to take the test. But it was around this time of year. It was right before Halloween. So what did she do? She ate a whole bunch of Halloween candy, and then while she was studying, and then she ate a whole bunch of Halloween candy right before she went in and took the test. Well, surprise, surprise to her, she went into class, and the professor lectured for about 25, 30 minutes before passing out the test. And so by the time the professor was done lecturing and passed out the test, this girl was on a sugar crash and could not keep her eyes open while she was taking the test. So candy, no. Just because your brain runs on glucose, which is sugar, does not mean you just feed it, pure sugar, because you will go on a sugar crash. But orange juice, on the other hand, is a nice time release. You can call it, I call it a time release energy, because it gives you the fruit sugars, the fructose from the oranges, and you want to make sure it's real orange juice, not Sunny D, or not 10% juice, 50% corn syrup kind of thing. You want to make sure it's actually 100% juice. But also, the thing is about orange juice is that it has the vitamins and minerals that also help supplement feeding your brain. So not only are you feeding your brain with the glucose from the orange juice, but you are feeding your brain with the magnesium, the calcium, and the potassium that is needed for your brain and for your neural synapses to work. And if you take A&P, if you take anatomy and physiology, you'll learn a lot more about that. But if your orange juice will have magnesium, calcium, potassium. We are all deficient in potassium in our Western diets, so potassium, you can never go wrong on potassium, and it helps your actual neural synapses connect, and connect the thoughts, connect the processes, connect the electricity to get to where it needs to go. So the orange juice not only gives you the glucose to feed your brain, but it also gives you that added stuff, the vitamins and minerals. But that is not all. That is not the only reason why I say drink orange juice before studying and drink orange juice before the test. There were several studies at Johns Hopkins. It originated out of Johns Hopkins, where they recreated the same sensory inputs for the students of whatever they were doing while they were studying and then whatever they were doing when they were taking the test. So for instance, if you're drinking orange juice before you're studying, so now your body has this sensory input of the smell and the taste of orange juice while you're studying, whatever it is, whatever class you're studying for, and then you drink orange juice right before you go in to take the test. That triggers that sensory input, the smell of the orange juice, the taste of the orange juice, that triggers your body to go, your brain goes, oh, we must be talking about math, or we must be talking about biology, or whatever subject it is that you used orange juice for. And it improves your recall so much. It's test results went up immediately, like 30%, without any other help or any other factors whatsoever, because your body is having that same trigger, that same smell, the same taste for the orange juice as you had when you were studying. And so all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, let's access all of this stuff that we had packed in our brain, and your recall becomes so much better and so much easier. So there's a lot more. I'm doing a lot more of a study about sensory inputs when you're studying. But for right now, I would say drink orange juice. Some people chew different flavored gum for each subject. Like they'll chew, double mint gum for math and juicy fruit for biology or whatever, so they can control that exact same taste for each subject, which is great, except that when they're not doing it with orange juice, you're still depriving your brain of the glucose and the vitamins and minerals that your brain needs to function. So, it's cool if you choose to do the gum thing, that's fine, but I highly, strongly recommend orange juice. Also, you can get like grapefruit juice or, different flavored fruit juices. Just make sure they're actually 100% juice and not that corn syrup juice cocktail stuff that's bad for you and has a whole bunch of nasty processed sugars in there. Now, also, you want to color code your notes. Now, I know you're already taking notes when you study, and you're already taking notes when you're in class. Hopefully you're taking notes when you're in class, or you have some sort of note taker, or you're recording the lecture so you can take notes later. If you are taking a math class, it is also very important to take good notes in math class. I have another video on my YouTube site and on my website about how to take notes in math class, particularly because nobody knows how to take notes in math class. They just write down the problem the teacher has on the board and they solve it just like the teacher did. But once you get home, you're looking at this piece of paper with a whole bunch of numbers on it, numbers crossed out, and you have no idea what you did. You have no recollection of what you did. So it's a very important thing, and nobody teaches you in K through 12 how to actually take notes for math class. So check out that video. And it goes through, I go through fractions. I do a review of fractions, and I use that as an example on how to take notes in math class, because it's so important to use your words and take notes in words, not just writing down the numbers when you're doing math class. But even if you're not in math class, if you're in biology or whatever, you're taking your notes when you study, you take your notes when you're in lecture, but then you have to go home and you need to redo your notes, reorganize your notes, especially in biology. Half of biology is how you organize your notes. Redo your notes and color code them. Highlight the same things in the same color, highlight the definitions in the color green or whatever, but whatever makes sense to you, you need to color code those notes. Watch movies, yay! As you can see, I'm not biased, but I did put my Suzanne's Tutoring YouTube channel up there at the top. But also we have great, there are other great YouTube channels like Ninja Nerd Science. That thing got me through microbiology. I swear, that dude is awesome. Khan Academy is also awesome. And these are all free. You can get most of them on YouTube or on their, Khan Academy has its own website as well. The Organic Chemistry Tutor is also good. He doesn't just do organic chemistry. He does basic chemistry, he does physics, a lot of STEM subjects. And he's really good with practice problems, just going on there for practice problems. My website is more explanation based. I do a lot of explanation based stuff, and Ninja Nerd Science does. He kind of does the same thing. He explains what the deal is, like what the process is and what all this stuff means. Khan Academy, you're probably familiar with. They explain. The Organic Chemistry Tutor is really good because he gives you a lot of practice stuff to do. So if you don't have a lot of homework in a class, but you feel like you need some practice, you can go on the Organic Chemistry Tutor YouTube channel, and he'll probably have some practice stuff if it's a STEM class. Now, and this is a very important point, you just want to chip away at things. You don't want to sit down and expect yourself to go through all of the lesson plan for that module and be able to understand it perfectly and have a handle on it by the time you're done with going over it for that day, because that is a ridiculous expectation. That's not how our brains work. There's nothing wrong with you if you go through the entire thing and you still only understand 30% of it. That is normal. It is normal to only understand a small percentage of something, especially when it's new information the first time you're going over it. So you want to have patience with yourself. And also, speaking of someone like with ADD, or some type of neurodivergence, a lot of times you cannot expect yourself to sit down and just sit there for 3 hours and absorb a whole bunch of information, and then that's it. And then you're done. No, it's you sit there, you can go over it for 10 minutes, especially if it's challenging material. Go over something for like 10 minutes and then, watch a portion of your favorite streaming show. And then if you can't afford to pay to get the commercials away, because I have to hit the commercials, Hulu and all that stuff, because I can't afford it. So I watch the thing until it's a commercial, and then once the commercial comes on, I go back and I study for another 5-10 minutes, and then I go back and I watch my show, and then I go back when it's a commercial and I study for 5-10 minutes. And a lot of times they tell you that when you're a kid not to do that, but that's actually, especially with neurodivergence, it's actually very helpful, I found, because the returning to the information constantly is actually going to help drill that into your brain and help you remember that stuff. So the process pretty much is you want to look over the chapter before it's presented in class. And now check this out, before it is presented in class. So get that syllabus out and look and see what your next class is going to go over. So study for your next upcoming class. Don't wait until the class happens and then study for it, because you're going to go into class, and since you haven't studied the material yet, you're going to be lost. And the more lost you are, the less you're going to understand the lecture. And the less you understand the lecture, the less good notes you're going to be taking. And the less good notes you're going to be taking, the less you're going to know what you're looking at later when you get home later on that evening and want to go over your notes. So go over the chapter or go over the material before that class day. And so that way, not only are you already prepped on what the teacher is going to be talking about, so you actually can understand at least half of what the teacher's talking about because you've gone over it already, but that will also give you a chance to jot down some intelligent questions that you can ask in class. One, to let the teacher know that you're paying attention and you're engaged, but two, because otherwise, how many times have you been in class and you're lost and it's just going over your head, but you don't want to raise your hand and ask any questions because you feel stupid. You feel like, oh, I'm the only one that's lost. I don't want to waste anybody else's time. If I ask this question, everybody else is going to be like, oh, come on, because everybody else is going to understand what it is. And that's such an erroneous attitude to have. That's really not what happens in reality, because the fact is that if you're in class and you're lost and you have a question and you're scared to ask the question, chances are, look around you. There's probably 4 or 5 other students at least who have that exact same question as you do, and they too are also too scared to ask the question. So now half the class is lost because everybody's scared to ask the question. But if you go over this stuff before you get to class, then you'll feel a lot more confident in asking the questions, because you won't feel like, it's just you, or you have missed something, or you just didn't study good enough, or whatever. You'll feel a lot more confident in asking the questions because you'll be on the same page as what the teacher's talking about. So look over the chapter before that class, that lecture for that class. Even if it's just to skim the material. You don't have to have 100% understanding of it before class. I mean, that's what class is for. But you need to at least skim over it and define your words and see if there's any words you don't understand. Go over the vocabulary words, and it's going to be so much easier when you get into the lecture. The lecture is going to make so much more sense. Also, number 2, you do not want to pull a marathon study session, because you're not going to remember it all. If you sit down for 3-4 hours and you're trying to cram it all in, and you're not going to leave this spot until you can understand everything. That's not the way your brain works. Nobody's brain works like that. Einstein's brain didn't work like that. You can't sit down for 3 hours and expect to be able to walk away with 100% understanding and 100% recall of all that information. Because guess what? Your brain is like a gas tank in a car. You can't go, no matter how cheap the gas is, say gas prices fell, and so you're like, oh, I'm going to fill up my tank because gas is cheap. But if your tank's already full, it's already full. You can't put more gas in the tank than the tank will hold. So you can't go and say, oh, well, I just got paid, I'm going to put $200 worth of gasoline in my car to be able to get through the month, because your gas tank is not going to fill up that much. The gas is just going to start overflowing. And the same thing with your brain. If you go in and you're sitting there for 3 hours, just putting information in, there's going to be a point, probably about the 40-minute mark, where your brain is like, I'm full, I'm done, and it shuts off. And then you don't understand anything. And then you think it's you, or you think that you're bad at the subject or whatever. No, your brain's just full. You got to let your brain, not be full. You got to fill up your brain and then stop, and then go watch a show, pat yourself on the back, do something nice for yourself, treat yourself for doing a good job, and then come back to it, an hour or 2 later, and then study a little bit more. Because you don't go to the pump and you don't pump $200 worth of gas into your car just because it's cheap that day, because your tank only holds 30 gallons or however much it holds. Same thing with your brain. Your brain's going to shut off and it's going to be like, I'm full. I'm not going to take any more. So you have to respect that. Respect your brain. Respect how your brain works. Don't pull a marathon study session. And this goes along with what I was just talking about. Study in 10 or 20 or 40-minute increments. These are just kind of average numbers. They don't have to be exactly 10 or exactly 20 or exactly 40, but right around the 40-minute mark is when your brain's probably going to shut off if you've pushed it that far. Get up, get some food, drink some orange juice, give yourself a treat, walk around the house, do the dishes, play with your kids, whatever you want to do, and then go back to it a little bit later, because your brain is going to need time to process that information that you just put in it. And then if you give your brain time to process that information, and then you go back for some more new information to add to it, your brain's going to have it filed a lot better in your figurative filing cabinet in your brain, and it's going to be able to process the information a lot faster. So you'll actually save yourself a lot of time if you stop yourself and give yourself a lot of breaks. I'm a big fan of naps. I will study for 40 minutes, and as soon as I start running into something that's like, oh, this is too much, I'll take a nap, and just a short nap, and I'll set an alarm on my phone, and I'll pop up and I'll go back to it, and things seem so much simpler and so much clearer because I've given my brain a nap and time to process the information that it already has. Which goes to our next thing, take frequent breaks. I'm getting ahead of myself here. And these are actually transposed. These are actually supposed to be the other way around, because first, right here it says first, refresh from last time. Every time you sit down to start studying again, just briefly refresh what you studied last time you were sitting there studying, because repetition is key. You have to repeat over and over and over again. You have to repeat the information. And also, you're never going to have 100% comprehension or 100% memory of what you're doing. That's just not how our brains work. So refresh from last time. Just, it doesn't have to take a long time. Just, 5-10 minutes, maybe just 5 minutes. Just go through your notes of what you'd written, blah, 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 just skim through them real quick, just to be like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then go on to add some new material to what you already have in your brain bank. And that's going to help connect all of the information a lot better. And it's not just going to seem like a bunch of random information. It's going to connect, and there's going to be a flow to it, and it's going to seem more relevant. Everything's going to seem more relevant at that point if you refresh first. And then, of course, anything you don't understand, make a note. I always keep my red pen with me, and as I'm making my notes and everything, if I don't understand something and I don't have time to look it up right then, I'll just put a big red question mark next to it. And so next time I go into class, or next time I see the teacher, or next time there's a one-on-one session, I can flip my pages and my notes really quickly and notice that big red question mark, and that's the questions that I need to ask. And so you'll go to the tutoring session. You've already paid for this tutoring, okay? This is included in the cost of your tuition. So you pay for it whether you use it or not. So I say get your money's worth and go in there and say, no, explain to me, what this is. And if they can't answer your question, then get a different tutor who can answer your question. Time management. Time management. You like my management? Because I managed for the time when I wrote management. So this is just kind of a recap of what we just went over. Go over the material before it is covered in class. Don't wait until after class and then try to study it. At least, and you don't have to have full comprehension before you go into class, but just skim over it. If you go to whatever chapter you're on, say in whatever class you're in, say you're doing chapter 10, and the next day is your lecture, and tomorrow's lecture is going to be over chapter 10. Well, so you sit down and you go to that chapter 10 in your textbook, and you don't have to read the whole chapter. I don't think I've ever read an entire chapter, but you don't have to read the whole chapter. But what you do is you go to the beginning of the chapter, and it lists, in most every single textbook, it lists the objectives of what the point is of this chapter. What are the points that they're trying to make? What are the big points that they're trying to get you to take away from? And then you go to the very end of the chapter, and the end usually has a page of vocabulary words that you need to know. And so those you're going to focus on. And then it usually has like a summary page, and it kind of summarizes the entire chapter for you. And so, as I said, you don't have to have, perfect understanding of the stuff before class, but go to the textbook and go look at the objectives at the beginning of the chapter, but then go to the end of that chapter and look up those vocabulary words and make sure that you are understanding what those words mean, because that means when you go into lecture, your teacher is going to be using those words again and again. And if you don't know what those words mean, then you're going to be totally lost. So look up those vocabulary words, make sure you know what they mean, and then go over the little summary at the end of each chapter, just so you can get a general idea of what your teacher is going to be talking about and what context is. Because if you don't understand what the context is of all this random information they're hitting you with, you're not going to really understand, well, okay, so why are you telling me this? You're not really going to understand how everything connects. Now, study small amounts a few times a day. I've already went over this and why. In short bursts. Not everything in one long marathon session. Do not marathon yourself. And that leads us to our next point here. Don't give yourself a panic attack by expecting to understand everything at once all the very first time. Okay? Because guess what? This is not everything everywhere all at once. It's a great movie, but that's not what school is. Okay? You can't expect yourself to all of a sudden sit down and just because you open a textbook, now you're a genius in physics. That's not how it works. And I'll tell you, the smartest, renowned scientists that we know of in our American history were not good at all of this stuff. They had to work at it. Oppenheimer, the atomic bomb. He was much better at theory, and he hated math, and he always got somebody else to do all the math problems for him because he just hated it and he did not want to spend the time on it, and he said it was his weakest subject. So it's totally fine. Do not give yourself a panic attack because you don't happen to understand 100% of everything all at once, all the very first time. You're totally fine. It's called normal because this is new information. Now, don't just study a section once and move on, and I think I covered this in the previous thing. It takes repetition. It takes repetition. It takes repetition. It takes what? It takes repetition. You have to repeat that stuff over and over again. You cannot go in and have somebody break down an entire car engine and build it back up in front of you in an hour and be like, okay, so you get it, and then expect you to be able to do it perfectly. Because you need repetition in order to remember all the little steps that go along and all the details that are important to know. So when you do study, the first thing you do is you go over the same section that you did the day before. You just refresh on that just real quick. And then you move on to whatever it is you're studying for that day. And you make sure you understand how what you studied before, what you studied yesterday, and what you studied today connects. Now, here is how you can study for tests. Look at your calendar and count backwards from the day of the test. And this is why you always need your syllabus. Always study with your syllabus. Always get your planner out and your syllabus out and plan according to the syllabus. Because like, let's say the syllabus has exam 1 on September 15th. Okay, but you are looking at this and it is August 31st. I don't even know if there's a 31st in August, is there? I don't know. There might be an August 30th. But okay, let's say August 30th because I don't know if there's an August 31st. So let's say now we have 15 days from September 15th from today, August 30th. That's 15 days to study for your exam 1. And your exam 1, your teacher said, is going to cover chapters 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so you have 15 days from August 30th to September 15th to take a test on it, chapters 1, 2, and 3. So in addition to your normal studying that you're going to be doing for class, you want to take your planner and you want to count backwards. How many days is it until your next test, which in this case is 15. And then you have 3 chapters you need to go over for those 15 days. So you divide those 3 chapters into the 15 days. So 15 divided by 3 is 5. So you have 5 days for each chapter to go over. So you're going to take the first 5 days, go over chapter 1, the next 5 days, go over chapter 2, the next 5 days, go over chapter 3. And let me give you a visual on this because it's hard to just kind of explain it out loud. So here's your calendar, right? So here's today, here's where it says start, here's today. And this is just an unmarked calendar. I'm just using this as a general hypothetical. Here's start, here's today. And then here is your exam. Here's your exam 1 is right here. Okay, so we're going to count backwards from when your exam is, which is this day. And we're going to count backwards to today and see how many days we have before the exam. So we have 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, 6 days, 7 days, 8 days, 9 days, 10 days, and then 11 days would be from today. So we're going to round that down to 10 days, okay? So we have 10 days. And let's say the teacher said, let's see, I put one up here, exam 2, chapters 9 through 11. So, and that's up here. And this is just random examples. So chapters 9, 10, and 11. So that's 3 chapters. So you have 10 days to study 3 chapters. Well, 3 goes into 10 3 times. And then you have 1 remainder left over because 3 times 3 is 9, right? So you have 3 days of 1 chapter each for 3 chapters, which equals 9 days. And then the 10th day is your exam day. So you don't want to learn anything new on exam day. You just want to be able to go over stuff. So this works out really perfectly. So let me get a clear calendar so you can see on here better. So let's start tomorrow with studying. So here's where it says start. That's today. So tomorrow is going to be day 1. The next day is going to be day 2. And then day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, day 7, day 8, day 9. And then we have a day 10, the day before your exam. Okay? So if we take, since we have 3 chapters to go through, we have chapters 9, 10, and 11. So the first day would be tomorrow, and then the next day, and the next day. So those are your first set of 3 days. So that's all going to be chapter 9. So tomorrow, the next day, and the next day is all going to be chapter 9. You're going to be going over chapter 9. And then the next 3 days, day 4, day 5, and day 6, you are going to study chapter 10. And then the next 3 days is going to be day 7, day 8, and day 9. So those 3 days, you're going to study chapter 11. So see, now you have it all planned out, so you're not spending too much time on one chapter and then neglecting the other chapters, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh crap, it's exam day. And then this extra day, this day 10 that's left over, that day you can refresh everything. You can refresh all of it all together and how it makes sense and how it fits together, and they'll leave you an extra day to contact your professor or your TA or your tutor with any extra questions that you still may have. And then on that next day, that's your exam day. And, as I've said before, I'll say it again, don't forget to drink orange juice when you're studying and right before the test. And don't forget to refresh your yesterday's studies before you move on to new information today, okay? So as I said before, it's chip away at it, small sections at a time. Little things add up to big things. You don't want to knock everything out at once because it's not going to work. You want to do a little bit at a time. Now, why am I so hell-bent on telling you about repetition? Well, if you ever go and see a great movie, like a really good movie, you're not, and you've never seen it before, you're not walking away from that movie with 100% remembering every single thing that went on in that movie and be able to connect all the dots in that movie, if it's a good movie. So let's take the movie. I don't know if you guys like old horror movies, but there's this old horror movie, A Nightmare on Elm Street. Okay? And there's this whole franchise, A Nightmare on Elm Street. It's Freddy Krueger, and he's got the razor hands, and he comes to you in your dreams, and it's a slasher movie. So A Nightmare on Elm Street. So, of course, it's all these teenagers end up getting killed by this, crazy monster guy in their dreams. So say you watch this movie the very first time and you're scared and you're watching the plot and you're like, oh no, and you're scared, and then the movie's over and you're like, ooh, that's a good movie, but can you walk me to my car because it's dark out and now I'm scared of the dark. Okay, so that's watching the movie one time. But if you go back and you watch that movie more than once, you're going to start picking up on a whole bunch of little Easter eggs that are in there that you did not notice the first time around. Because the first time around, you were just focusing on the plot and who was going to get killed because everything was new information. It was a new surprise to you. But same thing with studying. The very first time you go over something, you're just trying to get the hang of the basic plot line and what's going on with it. You're not going to be able to pick up on all these little details that you're going to eventually need to know for the test because the very first time you're going over it. So you watch the movie more than once. Now, if you watch the movie more than once, repetition breeds familiarity. Okay? And so in this movie, and I dare you, if you like slasher films, to go back and see this. Here's an actual image from the movie. So here's she's talking to her friend or whatever, and she's got out a journal, and she's talking blah, 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 and then she ends up getting killed. And here's another one. They're talking, they're like in a beach house, like some rich parents have a pool and a pool house or whatever, and they're in the pool house and they're sitting there talking, and they're talking to each other, blah, 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 blah. And then a few minutes later, somebody ends up getting killed. Well, if you go back and rewatch that movie over and over again and start to pick up on all the little Easter eggs that are going on with that, you'll start to notice Freddy Krueger's, that's the bad guy here, Freddy Krueger's shirt is the striped shirt. It's got stripes to it, and the stripes are red and green. His sweater is always a red and green striped. If you notice that, you start to notice this red and green. And then you start to notice, if you keep watching the movie, you start to notice red and green patterns. Because down here, like this still shot from the movie, she's holding a red journal, and behind her, there is a board game with some red coloring on it, and there is a big box that is also red. And it is sitting right next to this hat that is a green hat. And also, her walls are green. Okay, now let's go on to the next screenshot that I just showed you. They're in the pool house and they're talking. Well, look at this. Freddy Krueger's sweater is striped red and green, right? Well, they're beach towels. They're towels hanging up in the background while they're talking. There's a green striped and there's a red striped. And if you were to watch this movie, if you were to watch the scene, and so once the green and white towel and the red and white towel are right next to each other in the movie, then somebody dies. So, see, but it took watching the movie several times before you start to realize and pick up on these little secret Easter egg things that every time the director has in the background green touching red, that is a clue that in the next 5 minutes, somebody's going to die. Freddy Krueger's going to kill one of these people within the next 5 minutes. But see, you wouldn't have known that going into the movie at the very first time you've seen it because you're just scared and you're just wondering what the plot is. It's new information. You're not going to be able to pick up on all this stuff unless you watch it several times, right? So you kind of have to geek out on what it is you're studying. So, as I said again, chip away at it. Do small sections at a time. Little things will add up to big things. Now, catching up. As promised, since I have to do this too at my school because I had a stint in the hospital recently, I just wanted to tell you my tricks for catching up. So, first of all, don't be sad. It happens to the best of us. It happens to the best of us. Don't worry about it. Life happens. What is important is how you deal with it. So first of all is you have to stay current. So if you were behind, like say you got behind, you're like a month behind in studying what everybody's studying in the classroom. Do not start at that month behind and then try to like just study really, really, really fast to catch up to where everybody's at in class. Start with the current itinerary on the syllabus. Start with going over those vocabulary words and stay current with what they're doing now. Yes, you were behind and you missed some things in the past, but you don't want to get behind in the present and also be behind in the past. So you want to stay current, and then also you need to donate a little extra time in your schedule every day to start going back and studying the stuff that you missed. So stay current also means keep turning in all that homework. Turn in all your new homework on time. Because it's not going to help you if you are doing homework from a month ago that you should have turned in a month ago and you're missing the homework that is due now and you're getting zeros on that or you're getting points docked on that because you're not turning new homework in on time. Then, this is very important, contact your professor and tell them what's going on and see if you can make some sort of arrangements. Like, can I have an extension on this project or, can I turn in these past assignments for partial credit at least or, what can I do to catch up here? And usually the professors will be really nice about helping you because most of them want to see you succeed. And then this is important. In addition to your current studies, in addition to staying current, then you have to spend more hours throughout the week working your way backwards backwards, studying the parts you missed. So if like here's today, like on a calendar, today, and here's days. I'm just drawing a rough calendar here. And you're behind this much behind. So first you have to stay current. So start studying what you need to study today. But then after you're done with that, go back and study about half of what you had missed the day before. And then the day before that, study the other half, 2 of 2. And then you're going to be moving on to stay current. You want to stay current, but then after you're finished studying the new current stuff, you want to go back and then you want to study whatever you missed this day. And here's why this works better than just trying to play catch up. Now, have you ever been behind on bills? Have you ever been behind on rent or mortgage or, the electricity or whatever or something like that? Or your car payment? Okay, never pay your past debt first. You always stay current with your payment, with your current payment, with your rent or mortgage or car payment or whatever, car, etc. You always do this month's payment for your mortgage or your rent or your car payment. And then you pay your insurance. You do not let your insurance lapse, because we all know, because it's just our luck, that as soon as you let your insurance lapse because you're trying to pay bills, that's when you need your insurance. So you do not let your insurance lapse. And that's kind of like your homework. Do not let your homework lapse, okay? Because your homework's going to give you all those extra points that you need to keep your grade up to make sure you pass. And then you contact the landlord and see if payment arrangements can be made. Does that sound familiar? Like contact your professor and see if you can make some sort of arrangements. And then after you have paid your current rent bill, your current car payment, after you've paid your insurance, you've contacted your creditor to make payment arrangements, then after you've paid this month's bills, then you begin to pay the extra, working backwards from now throughout all the past months that you were behind until you were caught up. Does that sound familiar with doing the homework? If you get behind in homework, you stay current in your homework, in your studying. Do the current studying first. Do the current homework first. That's your insurance. Contact your professor. And then, after all that, dedicate some extra hours in your day to start making your way backwards, studying what you missed. And once again, rewatch movies, because repetition breeds familiarity. Okay, so now we've actually gotten to how to study, like what's going on with studying and how to actually study. Those were all study tips and tricks and how to survive in college and how to do this without screaming. But now we've finally gotten to the two major goals for studying, which are understanding the things and then remembering the things. So I'm going to take a break right here, and I'll be right back, and then we'll get right into it.